I don't know Josh Harris from a can of paint. I'm talking about the way he runs his Sixer team. I'm just going to assume he's going to run the Commanders the same way. Nothing personal, dude. You run that organization like a shit show. You made Philadelphia 76er fans tank and accept it and talked about some sort of stupid process. Look at the process here. How terrible is that? You absolutely bullshitted people to a point where they believed you. Man, culture's everything in sports. It really is. It was something interesting today. Something interesting that I heard on Birds 365. Marcus Hayes, the writer for the Inquirer, was on with the guys. And not to go exactly with what he said here, but I'm going to paraphrase it. The way he came off, it made it seem that Nick Sirianni, and we're talking culture here, really doesn't understand the Philadelphia Eagle culture. And I would have a topic here for you. How important is Sirianni in the success of the Eagles? How important to the success of the Philadelphia Eagles do you think Nick Sirianni is? How important is Nick to the culture? And was Marcus right when he said that Nick really doesn't understand the culture that well yet? I thought it was pretty interesting. How important is he in this whole process for success for the Eagles? Wonder how because listen, there is no question. And don't let anybody tell you this, that Nick Sirianni has any kind of say when it comes to personnel or when it comes to hiring coaches. He has zero. And I agree with Marcus. He has zero say in it. Now, I would give you this. I think Nick probably has a little bit more autonomy because there's been great success the last 2 years, especially since the 2-5 start. Okay? JM goes, Sirianni could nail his shoes to the door and we wouldn't skip a beat. I completely agree with you, JM. He's a widget. You know, Tone and I were talking about this. Howie Roseman is the maestro. Do you know who Nick Sirianni is? He's the fifth dude in the tuba section. Remember what he said during Super Bowl week? Hey, man, when I got the Eagle job, I had to introduce myself to the coaching staff. It was already in place. He had nothing to do with that, and he still doesn't. You don't really think he had anything to do with the picking of the coordinators, do you? Absolutely not. How important do you – I think it's pretty interesting culture. And it's really an eye-opener. And when Marcus from the Inquirer brings this up, I've been saying this to you guys the whole time. I'm going to tell you what I think Nick Sirianni's importance is. Neil goes, nothing. No. I do not believe Nick Sirianni has no place in the culture for the Philadelphia Eagles. That's where I disagree with Marcus. Because I'm going to tell you what I think his importance is. You see, he's a Pied Piper. Howie and the owners set the culture. You know what Nick Sirianni's great at? And you know why maybe Marcus has questions about whether or not he understands totally the Eagle culture? Here's what I say he does. He goes along to get along. He's not going to make waves like Doug did. If Doug Peterson can be fired, Nick Sirianni can be. This is why I told you last year when we had that topic. You don't think if Nick shits the bed, Howie's not going to fire that guy? You see the difference between the Philadelphia 76ers and the Eagles? Nick Sirianni could take a team to the NFC title game, or better yet, win a Super Bowl. Your resume and place in that organization is the fifth seat in the tuba section. You're part of the orchestra. That's it. Nothing more. You have a role. We have a culture. You will follow, or as they say, to go along, you get along. Doug didn't want to do that. That's why the owner went like this. Dude, we said it yesterday. You don't really believe that Jeffrey Lurie wanted to fire Doug Peterson, do you? But when he realized that Doug wasn't going to go along to get along, he couldn't have that. As much respect as he had for Doug, to get along, you go along. Do you know when this first popped up? This is why many of you and people even at the NovaCare Center come to this program every day. You know when that popped up? Is when Frank Reich was on this program and he recommended Sirianni. But he told Sirianni this, hey, they got a way of doing things there. And if you don't fall in line, you'll be on the same unemployment line as Doug Peterson. That's how it works. That's why the Eagles, it doesn't matter if it's Andy Reid, Chip Kelly, Doug Peterson, Nick Sirianni. They got a way of doing shit. That couldn't have been on display more this weekend, or this morning, when Marcus from the Inquirer was talking and said, I don't think that Nick really gets the culture, and he still needs a culture lesson. Yeah, but the one thing that he is doing, Marcus, that Doug didn't do, he's going along with it and getting along. And he's going to grow into the culture. That's why the Eagles are cool with him. That's why the Eagles like him. The process now is very different now than with Doug. I spent months long interviewing candidates, Sirianni's. Hey, I would say, the Sirianni conversation didn't really pop up until Frank Reich and the owner were talking about when they were in the midst of trading Carson Wentz to Indianapolis. That's when that whole thing popped up. And they recommended Sirianni. Sirianni parachuted in from nowhere, except the fact that they respect Frank Reich's opinion. He said Frank will go along with the system. That's why Frank is revered. Frank was going to be the offensive coordinator. We know that. He said it right here. He said it right here on this program. Nick Sirianni is important in doing this. The message from above. Because, again, Howie can't walk into the locker room and relay the message. Nick Sirianni's strength is not coaching. That high school shit he does, whatever, man. Okay? The high school bullshit, come on. It's how he expresses what they're looking for in that organization. Okay? What's up, C? Sills, would you consider bringing back Wentz as a backup? No, I don't need that nightmare. No, I would not. Why? Why walk back? I'd rather have Foles. I'd rather have Foles than Carson Wentz right now. Carson needs to be on his own. Marcus Haynes actually had a very insightful interview. He has a history with the franchise to glean relevant. No, hey, JM, that's why I thought it was one of the most interesting takes that I had heard anybody from the Philly. He was very to the point. I don't really think Nick knows the culture very well. He's not a really good culture guy. I'm paraphrasing it, but that was my takeaway. I was like, holy shit. Yeah, but he's a really good communicator and understanding of this. He's not going to ruffle feathers. But it did tell you this. Nick has no say in that organization. According to Marcus, he has no say. It's zero say. He has suggestions. I would make this point to you. I think probably Jalen Hurts has more say. I'd say Hurts has more say. That's why that culture is so important to that owner and that GM. It's so important. Dude, just by watching, and by watching Daryl Morey go through that charade, and you saw and you listened to him talking, and then you see how the Eagles operate and how the Eagles do things on a daily basis. You know, there's one thing that Howie Roseman does do, and what he's been better at since he came out of the broom closet when they stuffed his ass in there on Chip Kelly. You know what he has done? He's empowered more people. The Sixers don't empower enough people. I don't want to hear James. Hey, and for the record, okay, and for the record, do you don't really believe that that organization gives a shit whether Darius Slay likes that Matt Patricia's in the building? You don't really think that they run that the way the Sixers do, that James Harden had something to do with the firing of Doc Rivers? Do you really think any player in that building, maybe Jalen Hurts, could actually walk into Howie Roseman's office and go like this? You know, I don't really like Tracy Rocker as my D-line coach. We need to make a move here. Man, you know what? He's not putting us in positions to win. You don't really think that that organization would tolerate that that player would be cut or moved or traded. James Harden walks into Daryl Morey's office, and again, that shitty answer he gave after a blowout instead of look at the character that you had with the Sixers on Sunday. Joel Embiid throwing the entire team under a bus, and then you had James Harden throwing the coach under the bus. What a great tandem you got there. Man, I would never want that on my foxhole. Those two guys throwing the team, and then the other guy throwing the coach. You lit the whole goddamn thing on fire, bro. You're not going to see that in Philadelphia with the Eagles. That ain't going to happen because there's a culture there, and they protect that culture. Okay? They protect that culture. Dude, this is not about letting the inmates run the asylum. Not that kind of stupid talk. Not that kind of ignorant conversation. I'm talking about you don't let your employees run your direction, your program, or nor do you let the media influence you. You think Pat Riley sits around letting players tell him, hey, Eric Spoelstra, you're hiring a video dude? He's the best coach in the NBA. You got to have faith in the process, a real process. You see, the Eagles have a real process. The Sixers have a shit process because they put it in the hands of the wrong people. People who are protecting their resumes and players. Players should not be running your organization. That's why you play, you coach, and you're the GM. There's a reason there's titles. Everybody wants a piece of their own, I get it, their own direction. Sixers are the Chargers of the NBA. Yeah, well, anytime that hey, there's no question. Spanos family. You know what's crazy? Tom Telesco's a good GM. He's a good GM. He puts a lot of people on the field, but you know what? He goes to marching orders too. He has to listen to shitty ownership. Hey, you could be a great general manager or a great coach. If you got a shitty owner, you're not going nowhere. How many times have you seen places where by the way, Bruce Arians. Speaking of Bruce Arians and how Bruce Arians does and how he runs a program, he's going to join us at 5:30 Eastern time. We're going to talk to him a little bit about the RPO system, and we're going to get his thoughts on the Buccaneers, the organization, Jason Light. You know, people are telling me, and John McMullen's, I love John. I love when he comes on the program. He thought Shane Steichen's a great play caller. Well, I'm going to ask a true play caller and a Super Bowl winning head coach who was a play caller, if the RPO is a play calling system or more of a design system and the quarterback has more decision making in it, or if that's play calling. Why don't we talk to a guy that's got 4 Super Bowl rings? We'll do that in hour number 3 at 5:30 Eastern. Okay? And we'll get his thoughts. I'll get his thoughts also on Jalen Hurts. So that'll be there. We're gonna do my predictions on the division winners and also wild card teams here in a second. But just to expand a little more here, Sirianni has no say in that organization. I agree with Marcus on that. But he does have a place in it. All ownership cares about is being relevant. They don't care about winning like they claim to. And you know what's crazy about what Tone just said? All you have to do is look at their actions. You know what? If you muted the 76er organization and just went by their actions, you would call them liars. If you had the sound down and you just watched them for the last 7 years, all of a sudden you turn the volume up, you'd go, you're a liar. Nothing you said right there is true. Nothing. Nothing. Nothing you promised season ticket holders, fans of the team, nothing since you've owned that team have you come through on. Nothing except getting a new building, which right now you're now starting to campaign to get a new building for the Commanders. You understand something about getting a building for an owner. It's generational wealth. It increases their wealth when they get new buildings. You made Josh Harris even richer by giving him Wells Fargo, and he gave you shit. The process now is very different than with Doug. Sirianni spent pre-draft months interviewing candidates. Absolutely a lie. Sirianni is through. Howie not spending months interviewing coaches, especially pre-draft. That is an absolute, unbelievably not true comment. Absolutely not a true comment. Sirianni, if he interviewed candidates, it was Howie's list of teams that he wanted to talk to certain people. You are so out of your mind if you think Nick Sirianni has a say in that building when it comes to hiring coaches or coordinators or the type of defense they're going to run. Absolutely not true. And for the record, how many people think that the organization took the play calling duties away from Sirianni after the 2-5 start? How many people thought that they did and took that away from him? You know, so like, wait a minute. Are you under really the guys that a brand new head coach who's 2-5 and his ass is on the line and people are questioning whether or not he's a good coach? Just said, hey, why don't you do it? Mid-season? Okay. Yeah. Dude, he was on the rails to be a one and done guy if that thing continued. But people are going like, yeah, Sirianni, he came up with the decision on his own. Never had experience in his entire life. Hey, Joseph goes, I do. Okay. Okay. You guys let all these little like tidbits just follow through. He told you when he took the job in Philadelphia, he had to introduce himself. He told you that in January. He didn't know the coaching staff. Usually when a new coach gets a job, don't you think he gets to bring his own coaches in? Don't you get it? The majority of the coaches that they have hired have all been tethered to Doug Peterson and Frank Reich. All of that tree there is through Frank and Doug. Mike McCoy. All them guys all work together. Howie likes that tree. He likes the Doug Peterson tree. He likes those guys because you know why? They're designers of offense. They put boutique offenses together because that's Frank's forte. They got all that shit from Frank. Hey, again, there's a place in that organization for Sirianni. I'm not saying, but how many times have you seen Howie Roseman at the front door of the locker room in a big game when he's congratulating all of his guys when they walk in, including the head coach? How many GMs? The only other guy I've ever seen do that is Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is the only other guy, GM, I've ever seen congratulating guys so that everybody knows. Remember that Indianapolis? Was it the Indianapolis game? He's out front of the locker room congratulating everybody. Great job, coach. Way to go. Way to go. Hey, guys, brought Sue and Linville Joe. He wanted everyone to know it was him. He wants everyone to know it's him. Nothing wrong with that, man. Just don't let and by the way, I think the owner doesn't let it get too out of hand. I think that's his role in this. You know, football creates a lot of egos. And it can tear you apart. And that's what the magic of Bob Kraft was, is keeping that thing on the rails as long as he did. I can't believe Bob Kraft kept that thing on the rails for 20 years. I really can't. I can't believe Kraft kept that thing going for 20 years. Cannot believe it. Okay? The Eagles run that organization, and one more time, Doug Peterson's the fifth dude in the tuba section. Howie's the orchestra guy. He's the maestro. He's the guy with the sticks. Points to you. Points to you. Points to you. Which means you're all replaceable. Every person in that organization is replaceable, including Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson. Okay? That's why he's probably the best maestro right now in the NFL, maybe in sports. I'd give the Rays as the best organization for the amount of money that they spend. I think the Rays are probably the best organization. Andrew Silverman and those guys, and Andrew Friedman, who set the cement there for the Rays. That's a great organization down there. Okay? It is. It's a great – the Rays are incredible. $65 million payroll. They beat teams with $200 million payrolls on a consistent basis. It's remarkable. It's talent. It's recruiting. It's culture. Again, another place with culture. Okay? So, listen, it's not a slam on Nick. What coaching does Nick do? Jump on park benches? Give you crazy faces at the press conferences? What impact does you think he has? Keeping the locker room? The locker room right now is in a good place. Why is the locker room in a good place in Philly? Because you're winning. There's been no adversity yet. 2-5 has been the biggest adversity that the Eagles have had, and a little bit the injury at the end of last year. Now you got a little tiny bit more of an adversity because you lost the Super Bowl, but that's not tragic. The game's tragic how you lost it, but you still come from a place where, get this, you were on the podium. So you build on that. It's a building platform, being in the Super Bowl. You keep it going.